the right of the Rohingya refugees to return to their homes in Myanmar, and the Palestinians' legitimate aspirations for statehood and reduction of inequalities within and amongst nations. The danger of escalation of the war in Ukraine further justifies Nigeria's resolute calls for a nuclear-free world and a universal arms trade treaty, which are also necessary measures to prevent global human disasters. In this regard, we must find quick means to reach consensus on the nuclear non-proliferation treaty with related commitments by nuclear weapon states. I remain firmly convinced that the challenges that have come so sharply into focus in recent years and months emphasize the call by Nigeria and many other member states for the reform of the Security Council and other United Nations agencies. We need more effective and representative structure to meet today's demands that have since outgrown a system designed for the very different world that prevailed at its foundation in 1945. Change is long overdue. Mr. President, this is the first meeting we are having here in New York without the restrictions that characterized the last 3 years. The coronavirus pandemic ripped across national borders like a toxic whirlwind, leaving in its wake a legacy of pain and loss. Happily, we are also witnessed an incredible level of innovation and creativity from those who devised treatments and vaccines. These laudable achievements were underpinned by partnerships and international cooperation. We have also seen the bravery, care, and endurance of health professionals at every corner of the globe. With coronavirus, we saw very clearly how states tried to meet the challenge of a threat that could not be contained within national borders. The results were mixed, but at its best, cooperation among stakeholders was outstanding. It facilitated solutions that saved countless lives and eased the huge burden of human suffering. That same theme of unilateralism and the promotion of national interests competing with the common cause in the face of an existential threat has been our recurring experience in recent times. In every address I have delivered to this August Assembly, I have dwelt on the issue of climate change, especially as it fuels conflicts and complicates food security. Climate change reduces opportunity and prosperity, which in Africa, Latin America, and some parts of Asia also contribute to transitional organized crimes. As part of Nigeria's effort at achieving our global net zero aspiration, the current administration last year adopted a national climate change strategy that aims to deliver climate change mitigation in a sustainable manner. The measures we took at the national level also require climate justice. Africa and other developing nations produce only a small proportion of greenhouse gas emissions compared to industrialized economies. Yet, we are the hardest hit by the consequences of climate change, as we see in the sustained droughts in Somalia and floods of unprecedented severity in Pakistan. These and other climate-related occurrences are now suddenly becoming widely commonplace in the developing world. We are, in effect, literally paying the price for policies that others pursue. This needs to change. At the COP26 in Glasgow last year, I did say that Nigeria was not asking for permission to make the same mistakes that others have made in creating the climate emergency. Fortunately, we now know what we can do to mitigate the effects of the climate crisis and the related energy challenge. As a first step, we must all commit to releasing the financing and the technology to create a stable and affordable framework for energy transmission. Development financial institutions must prioritize de-risking energy projects to improve access of renewable projects to credit facilities. There should be no countries left behind in this question. Rocketing energy costs worldwide are, in part, the product of conflict and supply disruptions to Europe and the Americas. Yet, we are all paying the price. It is therefore our expectation that this UNGA 77 and the upcoming COP27 will help galvanize the political will required to drive action towards the fulfillment of the various existing climate change initiatives. Another feature of the last decade that has been the growing partnership between states and the increasingly influential non-state actors. There was a time when the most important event at this assembly was the speech by the world's most powerful leaders. Now, a tweet or Instagram post by an influencer on social or environment issues may have greater impact. Technology offers us greatly limitless opportunities and sometimes runs ahead of the imagination of regulators and legislators. At its best, social media helps strengthen the foundation of our society and our common values. At its lowest, it is a corrosive digital version of the mob, bristling with intolerance and division. In confronting these challenges, we must also come together to defend freedom of speech while upholding other values that we cherish. We must continue to work for a common standard that balances rights with responsibilities to keep the most vulnerable from harm and help strengthen and enrich communities. Efforts to protect communities from the scourge of disinformation and misinformation must also be matched with efforts to reduce inequalities and restore hope to our poorer and most vulnerable of our communities as a means to stem the many socio-economic conflict drivers with which we are faced. In spite of our efforts, humanitarian crisis will continue to ravage some of our communities. Nigeria, therefore, implores our global partners to do more to complement our endeavors. Indeed, the multifaceted challenges facing most developing countries have placed a debilitating chokehold on their fiscal space. This equally calls for the need to address the burden of unsustainable external debt by a global commitment to the expansion and extension of the debt service suspension initiative to countries facing fiscal and liquidity challenges, as well as outright cancellation for countries facing the most severe challenges. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, democracy is an idea that crosses time and borders. Certainly, democracy does not have its limitations. The wheels of democracy turn slowly. It can demand compromises that dilute decisions. Sometimes it bends too much to special interests that exercise influence, not always for the general good, in a manner disproportionate to their numbers. But it has been my experience that a democratic culture provides a government with the legitimacy it needs to deliver positive change. In Nigeria, not only have we worked to strengthen our democracy, but we have supported it and promoted the rule of law in our sub-region. In the Gambia, we helped to guarantee the first democratic transition since independence. In Guinea-Bissau, we stood by the democratically elected government when it faced mutiny. And in the Republic of Chad, following the tragic death of its president, the late Idris Deby Itno, in the battlefield, we joined forces with its other neighbors and international partners to stabilize the country and encourage the peaceful transition to democracy, a process which is ongoing. We believe in the sanctity of constitutional term limits, and we have steadfastly adhered to it in Nigeria. We have seen the corrosive impact on values when leaders elsewhere seek to change the rules to stay on power. Indeed, we now are preparing for general elections in Nigeria next February. As the 78th Anga, there will be a new face at this podium speaking for Nigeria. Ours is a vast country, strengthened by its diversity and its common values of hard work, enduring faith, and a sense of community. We have invested heavily to strengthen our framework for free and fair elections. I thank our partners for all the support that they have provided our elections. As President, I have set the goal that one of the enduring legacies I would like to leave is to entrench a process of free, fair, and transparent, credible election through which Nigerians elect their choice. Mr. President, the multiple challenges that face us are truly interconnected and urgent, and your choice of this season's theme, a watershed moment, transformative solution to interlocking challenges, is apt, in keeping with our obligation as member states of this noble organization. We'll almost do our utmost to work with you towards resolving them. In this regard, I reiterate my delegation's full and resolved cooperation. Let me convey my final reflection from this famous podium. We live in extraordinary times with independent challenges but enormous opportunities. The face of change can seem bewildering, with sometimes a palpable and unsettling sense of uncertainty about our future. But if my years in public service have taught me anything, it is that we must keep faith with those values that endure. These include, but not limited to, such values as justice, honor, integrity, ceaseless endeavor, and partnership within and between nations. Our strongest moments have always been when we remain true to the basic principle of tolerance, community, and abiding commitment to peace and goodwill towards all. I thank you all.
Au nom de l'Assemblée.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
L'Assemblée.
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Sayyid Ebrahim Raisi, President of the Islamic Republic of Iran. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Mr. Saeed Ebrahim Raisi, President of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
You're watching the 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly, and the President of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, just left the podium after giving a profound speech, making it very clear that this will be the last session he will be attending, based on the fact that a new president will emerge after the general elections, which take place in Nigeria next year. He also made it very clear that it's important to prioritize freedom of speech, and that a legacy that he would like to leave is one of a free, fair, transparent election. And his years of service have taught him about the importance of keeping justice and a seamless partnership between nations.
Absolutely, incredibly profound. And he also touched on climate change and the measures being taken by Nigeria to fight the climate crisis, noting that Africa and other developing nations contribute the least to the factors causing the crisis, yet are hardest hit. In the same breath, he addressed the rocketing energy costs globally and shared his hopes that COP27 will drive the political will needed to address the skyrocketing energy costs. And that was his final address as president at the United Nations General Assembly. All right.
For the creation of such a framework of all-encompassing justice, which means elimination of injustice. We are defenders of a fight against injustice in all of its forms, against humanity, against spirituality, against the Almighty, against the people of the world, no matter where it may occur. A wish to be closer to the Creator and the teachings of the Creator exists in all humanity, and their willingness for change is witnessed in revolutions throughout the history of humanity. Even though a lot of movements never reach the maturity of a revolution, many of the revolutions deviated from their original path. However, the success of many people and nations, such as the nation of Iran, in the realization of their aspiration for the Islamic revolution has strengthened in the heart of the people around the globe such aspirations. The Islamic Revolution of Iran was the realization of the movement of the people of Iran towards justice and fairness. Even though faced with a lot of plots throughout the decades, it has been able to safeguard itself. As a first step, the nation of Iran, based on an advanced social and organizational order, created the Islamic Republic of Iran in order to create justice internally and bring to the world order a message of justice and fairness. Key components on this path were spirituality, multilateralism. Ladies and gentlemen, I am grateful and honored to be the representative of a people and a nation that has inherited a great civilization that has been free for millennia and has always managed to defeat the plots of the enemies that sought to conquer it. A nation that has always seen oppression as an existential enemy and has always fought in order to destroy the enslavement of Babylonians all the way to the Palestinians. We believe in a common fate for humanity, and we are for the globalization of justice. What we seek for ourselves, we wish onto others as well, and what we do not wish for ourselves, we do not impose on others. The nation of Iran believes that justice brings unity, brings cohesion, and warfare is a destroyer of all things. for a country that wishes internally to have justice, but then outside of its own borders creates or trains various terrorist groups and unleashes them on various nations, must be ashamed in the face of humanity, must be ashamed when faced with principles of freedom and justice and fairness. Humanity does not only belong to certain segments of the world. When talking about and remembering the savagery and the crimes of ISIS, of Daesh, that enslaved Christian and Yazidi and other religious minorities, women and children, it shows when we entered the arena to defeat them, it shows that we have been clearly on the side and as defenders of human rights, and those who defended and promoted Daesh, ISIS, had to be seated at the table of the accused. Dear ladies and gentlemen gathered here today, we see today that we are witnessing a change of the world order, a unilateral world, a world of hegemony, a world in which financial power gains control over standards of behavior, where criminal and oppressive sanctions against nations and the use of international organizations as a tool of oppression and exerting pressure on defenseless nations. In other words, we're speaking of a world completely privy of justice and fairness. So this order has lost its support in the thought of nations and people throughout the globe. A new order has been shaping up to take its place, and it's without a doubt that it will be created from Lebanon to the Palestine occupied territories, all over our region. We see the defeated policies of such an old system. Now we see terrorism. We see the trampling upon of native cultures and religions, and standing unjustly against multilateralism, unilateral actions. All of these have created great challenges on the path to human progress. We firmly believe that in order to face the challenges, old challenges as well as new frameworks in the world, we have no choice but cohesiveness and unity, based on multilateralism and justice, based on shared human and common values, based on divine teachings. There is no other path. We believe that all freedom-seeking nations have their hearts tied to such deep-rooted values, and the defense of all of these values against the oppressors across the globe rests on our shoulders. What we seek is the right of the Iranian nation, of the Iranian people. A relationship based on oppression will not be tolerated. We will stand firm and proudly defend the rights of our people and our nation. We believe that any oppressive action is an action against world peace and stability, which is a threat to the entire world. Reaching security throughout the world through any path other than justice will not be sustainable or permanent, and that is precisely what we expect of the United Nations to support and do. Of course, the implementation of justice and fairness is quite challenging and difficult, and perhaps it is because of that many of those who claim to be on the side of peace, they run away from the responsibility of peace. So we say unto them, since you do not wish to carry the burden on your shoulder, do you not even wish to carry the burden of fighting against oppression? Our belief is deeply rooted in the Quranic culture that says, do not be oppressors nor oppress anyone. And the fate of many nations is tied to exactly these principles. Those who run away from the logic of character, fairness, and justice run to unilateralism and oppressive powers. A nation that lacks logic relies on coup d'etats, military interventionism, boots on the ground, a chosen and unfair selective fight against terrorism, and many other injustices. The use of nuclear weapons, did that take the world closer to fairness, justice, and peace, or did it become the foundation for hegemonic powers? The killing of hundreds of thousands of Yemeni, Iraqi, Syrian, and Afghan children, which human value did that serve? Were these not the evil faces of the total lack of justice and fairness in many parts of the world? And in reality, what does the Islamic Republic of Iran seek other than obtaining its own logical and fair right, which has caused havoc and chaos among the oppressors of the world? Dear colleagues, today the willingness to move in support of hegemony has become a sore point for humanity throughout the world, and it is a serious threat. It is the wish of the nations across the world on an increasing basis to obtain justice, independence, while enjoying security at the same time. The realization of the front of resistance shows, I repeat it, the realization of the doctrine of resistance shows the extreme and deep-rooted willingness of many people to obtain true justice, whereas unilateralism has been the tool that has been used to hold many countries back. On a selective basis, America cannot accept that certain countries have the right to stand on their own 2 feet, and they keep equivocating militarism with security. The Friends of America do not enjoy a better situation. What is occurring today in Europe is a mirror image of what has occurred in Western Asia in the past few decades. The comportment and the result of the movement of the troops throughout these regions all have yielded the same results, because all of them have shown that the fate of many countries shows that America has pursued her own interest at the expense of the interest of many other countries. Mr. Secretary General, dear colleagues, the Islamic Revolution in Iran was the beginning of a movement of a great nation of Iran to seek her own place in the world. And through the decades, we have been faced with foreign plots such as coup d'etats, oppressive sanctions, as well as hegemonic interventions. But none of the successes of the Iranian nation have been acceptable to the great powers. From the time that the first president of the Islamic Revolution of Iran, the late Mr. Raja'i, showed the sole of his feet that had been tortured savagely and placed his foot upon this podium some 40 years ago and showed the scars of the torture that he was subjected to at the hands of the Shah's secret police. After that speech in this very hall, he was martyred by the hypocrites. About a decade after, the late Imam Khomeini made it so that the nation of Iran was able to repel foreign aggression from her territory and be in charge of her own destiny. The people of Iran, who have themselves been victims of terrorism, have today become a supporter that can be counted on in the fight against terrorism throughout the region. Today, the Islamic Republic of Iran, in order to reach her just aspirations, has spent much capital. From the time when Saddam Hussein tore up the Algiers Accord and attacked Iran in an unprovoked manner, all the way to the time when the American government trampled upon the nuclear accord, and we saw a new phase of criminal behavior against humanity. Some time ago, the previous president of the United States of America announced that ISIS was created by the United States of America. For us, it makes no difference whether ISIS, Daesh, was made by which administration, or which American government. What matters is that a government on the other side of this planet decided to bring havoc and chaos to the geography of our region at the expense of the lives and the blood of women and children and the innocents. But the Islamic Republic resistance put an end to that movement, to that destructive movement. And the leader that descended into the arena of the fight against terrorism was no one other than the beloved late martyr General Qasem Soleimani. A man, a freedom-seeking man who became a martyr on the path of obtaining the freedom of the nations of the region. And the previous president of the United States of America effectively managed to sign the document of the savage crime, an illegal crime, an immoral crime. And what was said in so many words shows that the oppression that is imposed upon the nations of the region in such a fashion, it has managed to heal some of the broken hearts that we saw in result of this crime. The proper pursuit of justice in the face of a crime that the American president admitted to have put his signature on will not be abandoned. We seek through a fair tribunal, we will pursue through a fair tribunal to bring to justice those who martyred our beloved General Qasem Soleimani. Ladies and gentlemen, the history of Iran is the history of a nation that has learned to stand on her own 2 feet and not to lean on anyone else, to depend on anyone else. Iran learned this lesson after, in both world wars, it announced its neutrality, yet was always subject in both wars to foreign occupation. And after, in the 1950s, when it came towards America and relied on America in order to obtain the national dream of the nationalization of the oil industry, it was again betrayed. And after the nuclear accord was signed and accepted within the framework of the United Nations Security Council, even that accord was trampled upon unilaterally. Mr. Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, the nation of Iran has learned the policy of resistance and progress, which has been focused on pursuing because of an advanced and logical social order in which the Islamic Republic of Iran today, despite the oppressive sanction, has become a strong country with many impressive goals in the fields of technology and knowledge and expertise that have been obtained. We do believe that the world today needs a strong Iran. Today, while having the capabilities to export, and in addition to our exports of oil and gas, we do have distribution networks for electricity throughout our vast nation. In knowledge seeking, biosciences, nanotechnology, nuclear sciences, we are at the forefront. And Iran's growth in these sectors is considerable. And it shows our social efforts where in many instances, for example, when we have tried to bring universal healthcare coverage to 85 million people, and the pursuit of the will of the people is a foundation of the system of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Whereas during the times of the imposed war by Iraq against Iran, we were even prevented from being able to purchase barbed wire. But today we have been able to manufacture, through indigenous knowledge and capabilities, the most modern needed systems to defend our nation. People of the world, dear colleagues, Mr. Secretary General, it wasn't that our enemies took a step back. It was our nation that managed to drive all of her enemies from the arena by participating in an impressive and unprecedented fashion in the Islamic Revolution to solidify values of faith and divine will. In the second step, the policy of good neighborly relations. Progress in economic and trade relations have now been brought to the forefront of the Islamic Republic's foreign policy. We wish to have extensive relations with all nations throughout the world, particularly with our neighbors. War is not the solution to crises. Dialogue and conversations and negotiations are the true solutions. The Islamic Republic of Iran, as a powerful country in the region, is present and willing to solve crises. During the past few years, the regional trade of Iran has seen impressive increases, and we have now entered with our neighbors into a new season of expansion of friendly, neighborly, and brotherly ties. This brings stability, this brings security to all sides. We proved during the hard times of all of our neighboring countries that we are their true friends. During the numerous conversations that I've had with regional leaders, one of the main points was that the regional security must be born from within and not from the outside. And the way to realize that is collaboration and cooperation, not by forming opposing blocs. We must rely on brotherly and friendly relations. If we leave the fate and the destiny of the nations of the region in their own hands, then the occupiers will be gone, and neighbors will remain for one another in eternity. In a not too distant past, we saw the fires of war between the two brotherly nations of Iraq and Iran by the encouragement of enemy powers throughout the world. But today we see the marches of Arba'in in observation of the 40th day of the martyrdom of Imam Hussein. We see that that grand, glorious march takes place in observance of that martyrdom, and in order to renew our faith in those values and to respect those who gave their lives, the descendants of the Prophet who gave their lives for human dignity and human values. Dear colleagues, I would like to direct your attention to one of the most egregious points that shows the oppressive powers present in the region. The region has not seen previously such a occupying savage power such as the Zionist regime in its midst in the past. The killing of children and women are present in the dark report card of the Zionist regime. It has managed to form the biggest prison in the world in Gaza. And the building of the expansion of settlements and housing illegally on Palestinian territories and on Palestinian farms, and the killing of their children and new generations shows everyone that 7 decades of Israeli occupation and savagery is still with us and not ending. But the world powers must show why they keep running away and evading the solutions proposed by the Islamic Republic of Iran in order to resolve the Palestinian crisis. All of the Palestinian territory from mountainous region to the sea requires only one solution, which is the reliance on the votes of all Palestinians, composed of Muslims, Christians, and Jews, in a completely comprehensive referendum. The occupying Zionist power that has occupied.
All right, we're currently live from the United Nations General Assembly, where Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi is currently taking the stage. And of course, this is amid major women-led protests that are currently taking place in Iran following the death of Mahsa Amini. And that death happened in police custody. He did say that there is an ongoing investigation on an issue within Iran without mentioning the issue directly. Throughout his speech, he slammed Western nations on their human rights and women's rights records, specifically stating that the U.S., the United States of America, cannot tolerate independent countries, and also slammed Canada for their treatment of indigenous people.
Indeed, and also set to take the stage later on will be Kenya's President William Ruto, Rwanda's Paul Kagame, and the U.S. President Joe Biden. But moments ago, we were listening to our very own president, the president of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, who made a very profound speech. And he made it very clear that this would be his last address, the United Nations General Assembly, based on the fact that he will be stepping down for someone else next year, who, it's the general elections that will be taking place. So that he made it very clear that they will be seeing a very different face. And he also made very, very important, he touched on various issues, especially when it came to having a legacy of free, fair, and transparent elections. I think that was a very important message to send, especially now that we have issues, or Anik has pointed out the issues of vote buying and security. So him saying that he wants to make sure that his legacy is of free, fair, and transparent elections, to me, that communicates that he's sending a message that this should be a very peaceful process, and to also curb any sense of insecurity in the minds of the electorate. I don't know how it resonated with you.
Absolutely. This was a very bold message to the international community, especially when you look at what's happening locally, where there's so much discuss, so much debate in the public spaces within Nigeria about what exactly President Buhari's legacy will be. He was in Imo State last week, and there were questions around him saying the various milestones he feels are the milestones that show that he was an effective leader. And those are always met by rebuttals and question marks when we look at the current state of the nation, and people say, but truly and honestly, what is your legacy? So I think this was a great opportunity that he used to vocalize to the international community that, take away whatever else you may hear, but this is what I'm declaring now as my legacy. Will that transpire? I suppose we have a few months in the making before we see how that will pan out. But certainly, and on the back of that, Cynthia, another point that stuck out to me in the speech is where he says, and I quote, "Another feature of the last decade has been the growing partnership between states and the increasingly influential non-state actors. There was a time when the most important event at this assembly was the speech by the world's most powerful leaders. Now a tweet or Instagram post by an influencer on social or environmental issues may have greater impact." Listen, the context of this statement is not lost on us, giving Nigeria's, this current administration's, should we say, their ongoing relationship, the ups and downs of their relationship with Twitter specifically, yes, and the role that Twitter has played within the Nigerian, not just the political space, but the civic space as well. And here he is acknowledging that, listen, we understand that at the moment, Twitter and Instagram are more powerful than a president stepping up on the podium podium of the United Nations General Assembly to give a speech. And I think that's a very important message to the youth of Nigeria, specifically the youth. Well, let me just say the people who are online within Nigeria, to say, okay, so we are being heard and our voices do have power. Very, very profound for me.
Very profound. And to your point, this all coming at the time when the ASU strike has also been, analysts have said that it's the government's way of punishing the youth. This also is contradictory in the sense that it brings a sense, it feels like he's been rather inclusive in his statements. But also what was profound was when he was making that statement saying they'd see a new face, and he says that one of the lessons that he's learned during his years of public service is that they must keep the faith with those values that endure. And these include, but are not limited to, such values as justice, honor, integrity, ceaseless endeavor, and partnership within and between nations. I think that's also him opening the door to say, I'm not looking to do any of this by myself. Nigeria is not looking to isolate, the nations. We're looking to keep the relationships that we formed going and even possibly create new ones. So I like the fact that he's been rather inclusive, both with the social media aspect that you mentioned in terms of Nigerian youths and also the assembly that he's addressing. I think I think he really seized this moment and did justice to it. But the legacy aspect was the highlight for me, because that really sends a message of everybody needs to get in line and do what they need to do to ensure that we contribute our own quota to make sure that the elections are free, fair, and credible, because it's not something that will be achieved by one man.
Absolutely. Cynthia, a very beautifully written speech. And I want to, on that note, echo another portion where, of course, we can't speak of elections without speaking of democracy. And there was a great emphasis on democracy and the rule of law. And I quote, he said, democracy is an idea that crosses time and borders. Certainly, democracy does have its limitations. He said the wheels of democracy turn slowly. It can demand compromises that dilute decisions. Sometimes it bends too much to special interests that exercise influence, and not always for the general good. So this is a little bit contradictory, because in one breath you're saying, you know what, I want free and fair elections, and my legacy is this legacy of serving everybody, if I may. So let's flash back to his inauguration, where he says, I belong to nobody, I belong to everybody. And in essence, this is what he's saying again at the United Nations General Assembly, because he's saying democracy isn't really working for us. He's saying that democracy turns slowly and it's now serving special interests groups of influence, and not always the general good. So question mark, who are we talking about here? I'll leave it to our viewers.
But this takes me back to the interesting conversation we had yesterday with our guest, who was, who said that the governors of Nigeria are the reason that our democracy is what it is today, because they're clinging to power, not necessarily giving the youths an avenue to take proper positions of authority. So what you're saying is, it's like, who are you talking about specifically?
Somebody's being spoken
he didn't
about.
throw anybody under the bus. But what stood out again was the fact that President Muhammadu Buhari of Nigeria wants to ensure that his legacy is one that ensures free, fair, and transparent elections, considering that the 2023 general elections are just a few months away.